Welcome to the Good Reading Magazine podcast. Good Reading is a monthly magazine dedicated to books and reading and aims to help readers discover their next favourite book. You can find out more about the books discussed on today's podcast at goodreadingmagazine.com.au.
Spring's Eve, Winter of Three. Winter's last midnight ticked closer. A cluster of clocksmiths idled outside the Nevermoor Houses of Parliament, watching and waiting. The sky above them was black and filled with stars, but the sky-face clock in its tower wore a pale wash of morning-tide pink, unchanged these past 3 years. Across town, a second group of observers gathered in Bohemia, beneath a similar clock set atop a glittering music hall, surrounded by a crush of Spring's Eve revellers. A third stood beneath the old mercantile clock tower at the docks, ignoring the sailors and fisherfolk roaring obscene shanties from brightly lit boats. A fourth lingered near the small, almost hidden clock above the stone entrance to the Gobelin Library, and a fifth stood outside the Lightwing Palace, eyeing the royal family's extravagant golden timepiece from a respectful distance. There were more of these uncommon clocks, scattered across the pockets of the Free State. Their faces bore no hands or numbers, only a circle of empty sky inside the glass. Tonight, every one of them had drawn an audience.
Jessica Townsend is the author of the Nevermoor series. Her multi-award-winning The Trials of Morrigan Crow was released in 2017. The series continued with Wundersmith, The Calling of Morrigan Crow, and then Hollowpox, The Hunt for Morrigan Crow. Jessica's personal fascinations include public transport, ancient cities, hotels, opera singers, Halloween, secret societies, and gigantic cats, all of which have found their way into Nevermoor. Today, I'm talking to Jessica Townsend about the next book in the Nevermoor series, Silverborn, The Mystery of Morrigan Crow. Jessica Townsend, welcome to the Good Reading Podcast.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Silverborn is the fourth book in the Nevermoor series as we follow the adventures of Morrigan Crow. For those who might not be familiar with Nevermoor, tell me a little about this magical realm. There's so many mysterious layers to this place, but you are most definitely the best qualified tour guide.
Well, Nevermoor is a magical city. It is a secret magical city, in fact. At the start of book one, we have our hero, our protagonist, Morrigan Crow, who is born in a different place. She is born in the Wintersea Republic, and she is born on the unluckiest day. Which means that she is not only blamed for everything that goes wrong, from big things to little things in the place where she lives, she's also cursed, and she is supposed to die on her next birthday when the book opens. But instead, I couldn't let that happen, obviously, in the first chapter of my hero's journey. So instead, she is rescued and she is spirited away to this secret, fabulous, magical city called Nevermoor, where she's been invited to compete against hundreds of other children in a set of trials to gain entrance to a secret society. And that is Nevermoor.
Now, if I were to visit Nevermoor, where do you recommend I go? Who is a must-meet? Who or what should I avoid? And will a Nevermoor phrase book be of any use?
Well, there are a lot of languages spoken in Nevermoor, so it might be a very, very thick phrase book. But a few dragon tongue phrases might be helpful, I suppose. What I would recommend you do, first of all, is check into the Hotel Deucalion, which is where Morrigan goes to live. And the Hotel Deucalion is a living building. It has its own personality and thoughts and its own magic. And when Morrigan goes to live there, her bedroom changes according to her wants and needs and personality. And so that would be my first recommendation. Definitely you need to meet the proprietor of the hotel, which is of course Jupiter North, the fabulous Jupiter North, who is also Morrigan's patron at the Wonder Society. And you should probably meet his head of housekeeping, Fenestra, who is a gigantic talking cat. I would recommend that you avoid the sewers, and the scaly sewer beast and the bonesmen who live down at the river. But other than that, the world's your oyster.
Now, if I were to check into the Deucalion Hotel, if I can indeed check into the Deucalion, a very special kind of accommodation, as you said, it's also Morrigan's home. What might I expect from a stay at the Deucalion? Speaking for myself, I do need a lot of pillows and something good to eat.
Well, you will absolutely find both of those things. I also need a lot of pillows. I'm sure that the Hotel Deucalion would have a pillow menu. And you will find lots of fabulous things to eat. There is a feast all the time you definitely find a little fireside tea tray with some scones and some delicious things. But also you might find a smoking parlor, which is not a parlor where people go to smoke. It is in fact a room that emits clouds of scented vapor from its walls, and it has a schedule that changes by the hour. And so you might enter and find that it is popcorn smoke, which is supposed to evoke a sense of childhood nostalgia, or lavender smoke, which is going to help you get to sleep, or honeysuckle smoke for romance in the evenings. So that's definitely one of the features. You might find a gigantic frozen lake in a random room somewhere. You might find a hall of shadows where the room is completely empty except for one lantern, and every shadow puppet that you make on the wall comes to life and does its own crazy thing. So there are a lot of wild and ridiculous places, even just within the hotel. Lots to explore.
Wow, I'm there already. Now, as you said, Morrigan Crow, she was born on the unluckiest day of the year, and she's cursed. She's blamed for all the local misfortunes. Unfortunately, she's also been outed as the first Wundersmith for 100 years. What does all this mean for Morrigan Crow and its curious inhabitants and assorted spectral beings?
Well, what does it mean for Morrigan Crow? Nothing great from the outset, because as much as it might sound brilliant to be suddenly gifted with these powers of being a Wundersmith, nobody trusts a Wundersmith, because the last Wundersmith in Nevermoor famously created an army of monsters and tried to take over Nevermoor and failed and has been in exile ever since. That is Ezra Score. And of course, everyone just thinks that the next Wundersmith will just be Ezra Score Part 2. But the other side of it is that she kind of has no way of learning how to use these supposed powers. And so at the moment, they're kind of just a threat to her than a blessing. But that is kind of the work of the series, is that she now has to figure out how to learn the wondrous arts and how to become a Wundersmith.
It's a kind of learn as you go experience for Morrigan
It
Crow.
really is.
Now, the mystery of Morrigan Crow begins with several intriguing gatherings across Nevermoor, one of which we heard about at the beginning of this podcast. The clocksmiths are awaiting something important to happen. The wondrous society tradition of the Black Parade is taking place, and Hallowmas Night approaches. Where are these significant events leading us, and why are they important to the life and times of Morrigan Crow?
So the changing of the sky-face clocks that happens at the beginning of this book, it is a really significant part of the kind of calendar in this world. So time is measured slightly differently in this world to in our world. They go through ages, and these ages could be any length of time, 9 years, 10 years, 20 years. It's a moving, shifting thing. And all of these ages have 5 different phases. And the first 3 books, we have been in the first phase of the age, which is called Morningtide. And then as we enter book 4, Silverborn, there is the question of whether we will now be entering the second age, which is called Basking, which is a time of high risk and high reward. It is a time where supposedly the age will decide what it wants to be known for, and that could be something really great or it could be something really bad. So it's this very exciting time, particularly for clocksmiths, who are the people in this industry that kind of monitor and regulate these sort of things, and they're all very excited. That event, the changing of the skyface clocks, is actually a flash forward. So that is kind of a little prologue of what is happening right at the end of this book. And then the next chapter we go to Hallowmas, which happens 4 months earlier. And Hallowmas is just like Halloween in our world. And the Black Parade is this event that happens every year in the Wondrous Society, which Morrigan is a part of. And it's like a huge honor to march in the Black Parade. And chaos ensues at this particular Black Parade.
Well, let's talk about the Wondrous Society and the Wundersmith powers, because Morrigan Crow was admitted to the Wondrous Society, or WunSoc, in the first book of the Nevermoor series, and she's got a pretty good track record already. She ended the Hollowpox epidemic, and that was the third book in the series. But now, as a senior member of WunSoc, her ability to wield the power of wonder is tested, but as both some French guy and Spider-Man's Uncle Ben both said, with great power comes great responsibility.
So true. This is it. It is a very big responsibility, I think, to put on the shoulders of a teenager. Morrigan is 13 when this book opens, and she does turn 14 at the end. But there is this sudden sense of really coming into her powers properly for the first time. And without wanting to give too much away, at the end of Hollowpox, she makes this very big decision, which has a lot to do with her education and the next steps of her education as a Wundersmith. But what it means is that it's quite a dangerous decision that she's made, and she has this big, dangerous secret that she is keeping. But on the flip side, it means that she is coming along very suddenly in leaps and bounds as a Wundersmith. And yeah, it is a very big, scary, dangerous responsibility to be on the shoulders of a 13-year-old. But she handles it very gracefully.
Morrigan seems to be able to see things and do things that other One Sock members can't do or can't see.
She can do a lot of things, and also the other character as well, who, so there are a lot of different powers in this world, a lot of different. So she has a friend who is a mesmerist, which means that she can, with the power of her voice, she can sort of suggest that people do things and they just do them. And then the flip side of that is that no one remembers her. As soon as they walk away from her, she's forgotten. And another one is her patron Jupiter, who is a witness. And as a witness, he can see things. He can see things that even Morrigan can't see. So Morrigan is able to see kind of the source of where this world gets all of its power and energy from, which is like a kind of substance called wonder that is everywhere. It is in everything all around us. And when she summons wonder as a Wundersmith, she's the only person who can do that other than Ezra Spall. She is able to see wonder. But Jupiter as a witness, he can see everything all the time. He could look at you, for example, and tell you your best childhood memory and what you ate for breakfast and what song you have in your head, and the fact that you are maybe keeping a secret from that person, or that you're mad at this friend. He sees those things like little splashes of color or shapes all around us. And so yeah, there's a lot of different things, but being a Wundersmith, obviously, Morrigan's powers are kind of like exponentially greater and also have much bigger consequences because they're so dangerous.
I hope I never run into Jupiter because I don't want anyone to see what's inside my head.
Well, like he says early on in the books, he says, people tend not to want to be friends with witnesses for exactly that reason. I don't know how he is as popular and beloved as he is. Maybe he's just good at keeping his mouth shut.
I completely understand. Now, here's a bit of a tangent. Your biography informs me that you are a fan of public transport. And while the sights, sounds, and smells of Sydney's own rail network are one kind of adventure, while in Nevermoor, I might choose the Wonderground, although I might prefer the Brolly rail. But then there's also the Gossamer line, but I wonder, can I even access that? Which do you recommend for the most comprehensive travel experience in Nevermoor?
Well, definitely not the Gossamer line, because people who use the Gossamer line, it's banned for a reason. It is this sort of it allows you to kind of travel incorporeally across the network of the whole world. So you can go anywhere you like, but your essence of yourself kind of leaves your body. And if you're not experienced at that, sometimes people who were then put back in their bodies and their minds never fully synced up, and so they were driven mad. So I definitely don't recommend the Gossamer line unless you are a Wundersmith. The Wonderground is an absolute model of engineering, and it's a marvel. And a lot of that is so inspired by my travels. When I was in my 20s, I moved to London, and I moved there from the Sunshine Coast, which is where I live, where you kind of have to wait an hour for a bus to come along. And then going and discovering the London Underground was just mind-blowing to me. And it's still mind-blowing. I'm such a dork about public transport, but just like, what do you mean there is an underground network of interconnecting like railways transporting millions of people every day? And what do you mean I only have to wait 2 minutes for the next train? That's That's just madness. And to me, that already feels magical in a very real way. And so that had to be kind of part of the story. The brolly rail is a different thing altogether. The brolly rail is just incredibly dangerous. You have to, if you have really good upper body strength, definitely take the brolly rail. Basically, you hook the end of your brolly onto a loop on this kind of, it's almost like a monorail, but it never slows down. It doesn't slow down to let anyone on. You just have to be ready with your brolly to hook onto a loop and jump as it goes past, and then it will whiz you all over the city, up and down and over buildings and down on the ground. And then you just have to jump off where you want to land and hope you don't break a leg.
In the course of this book, Morrigan Crow discovers she's got some relatives on her mother's side who live in the Silver district of Nevermoor, and there she's introduced to the Darling family. What is life like in the Silver district, and what does Morrigan discover about herself there?
It's a very cloistered place of incredible wealth and opulence.
And watery.
And watery. It is, yeah, I wanted to, I really love Venice. I've only been to Venice once, but I loved Venice and I wanted to create something that felt, because again, like a lot of places and things in London, Venice to me feels like a fantasy world. Like it just doesn't seem like it should exist. It is, there is something so magical about it. And so I wanted this neighborhood to be this kind of, hat tip, I guess, to Venice. And it is this place of just obscene wealth. So it is a gated community where all of the aristocracy in Nevermore live, and they live in these beautiful, soaring, elegant townhouses, and they have this enormous green space in the center of it called the Paramore Pleasure Gardens. And that was sort of, I drew inspiration from, the old Victorian pleasure gardens where you would go and there would be a circus and a huge carousel and a zoo and a maze and parties every night, and it is very much that. And so Morrigan, spoiler warning to anyone who hasn't read it, but she does discover that she has some family living there, and she has lived in Nevermore for 3 years now and sort of felt like she'd seen it all, but you will never get to the depths of what Nevermore has to offer. It is like it's just ridiculousness in every direction, and she does spend quite a lot of time there. And there's a lot of there's a huge class divide in Nevermore that we're kind of experiencing for the first time through this. So that was a really interesting and fun element to explore.
As part of her visit to the Silver district, Morrigan Crow is compelled to solve a murder, that of the groom at her aunt's wedding. Now, Morrigan's special powers must render her no ordinary sleuth. But who can Morrigan rely on? But just as importantly, who might hinder her progress in solving that murder?
Well, the person she relies on most of all to help, that in some ways the Sherlock to her Watson in this is Cadence Blackburn, one of her best friends, who just happens to be very intelligent and also just a huge fan of reading murder mysteries. So she's read 400 and something murder mysteries in her life and is absolutely thrilled to have one that she can solve in real life, just like her heroes in these books. And so Cadence is the expert, and Morrigan kind of just follows her lead. The biggest hindrance here is slightly unexpected. It's actually her patron, who is normally her biggest champion and advocate and her biggest source of help. But he, kind of rightly so, doesn't want her to be investigating a murder at age 13.
This is Jupiter North.
This is Jupiter North, yeah, who is her patron, sort of guardian. He's the person who she lives with and who kind of guides her through life. And he is terrified at the thought of her being in this place where he is not and investigating this murder. But she does it anyway because she's a teenager. You gotta, you gotta break the rules sometimes.
Will her special powers be of any use?
It's a tricky one because the thing that is of most use actually is Cadence's cleverness more than anything, because her powers, she does use them a lot in the Silver District, but not necessarily to help her solve a murder. That is a much more, I think she feels slightly out of her depth in that sense, because that's a much more kind of that's a trickier operation. It's a much more cerebral sort of operation than necessarily blasting in there with her powers. But we do see her use those Wundersmith powers, and she is like developing and growing and learning a lot about them in this book.
We won't take the story any further because I don't want to spoil the story for our listeners. Let's talk about the author of this book. The extraordinary powers of Morrigan Crow and the extraordinary world she inhabits are obvious. But what about the extraordinary powers of the author? From what well do those powers spring, and what drives Jessica Townsend?
Good question. From what well do those powers spring? I think the biggest gift that any author, but particularly a children's author, can have is obviously imagination, but it's not even for the reason of being able to imagine all of these things into life. It's also the fact that kind of that is where empathy springs from. Like we as kids, our ability to imagine then transforms us into adults who have empathy because we are able to imagine ourselves into other people's perspectives. So I think that that is kind of the best tool in my arsenal, I guess, as an author, is being able to really imagine myself into this like very specific, difficult situation that this kid is in, and just think, how would I feel and what would I do? How would I respond to this situation? As for the rest of it, I don't know where it comes from. I just was always like a kid who liked to be inside my own head. And I think also I was very lucky to grow up in that, as a millennial, growing up in this kind of liminal period, right? Where, we have lived before and after the internet, and before and after this like constant stream of content that is being put into our eyes and brains. And so the biggest gift I think that I had that helped me develop my imagination and develop my like daydreaming muscles, because I do think that they are skill, that's a skill, daydreaming, is a childhood with bouts of boredom. Like I didn't have a constant source of like a planet of content. Like there wasn't YouTube, there wasn't Netflix and all of these different things that you could just like dip into like a kid in a candy store. I had to, there were half-hour waits in the line at the bank, when I was a kid, where I didn't have a phone in my hand where I could access the entire world.
Now you don't even have a bank.
Well, exactly. When was the last time any of us set foot in a bank? But like that I truly think, and I feel like I sound like a grumpy old curmudgeon being like, well, in my day we got to be bored, but truly it was a gift. Like it didn't feel like much of a gift at the time, but it meant that like I was exercising those daydream muscles all the time because I had no choice. And I do think like that is kind of where that story making engine stems from.
Yeah, I think time is the crucial word there.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
This book is overflowing with people, places, ideas. With all that going on, is there a sense of order in your head?
Well, listen, you're talking to a gal with diagnosed ADHD. No. Kind of, yes. It's chaotic order. So the thing about my brain is that like this world I'm building, I should say, it is like a galaxy. It feels very big. It feels like there are no kind of borders to it. It just keeps growing and growing and growing. And I keep so much of it just in my head. It's just there all the time. I also have like what I call the graveyard, or it's not really a graveyard, it's more like a sand pit, which is just like millions of words, millions and millions of words of world building and plotting and ideas and what happens next and who is this character and lists of names and lists of places and monsters that could exist and blah, blah, blah. That I have sort of carried with me from laptop to laptop for the last 20 odd years. And it just keeps growing and growing. So it is there, it is outside of my brain, but so much of it is just constantly in my brain as well. That is just the way that my head wants to work. Unfortunately, because of all that stuff, there's no room for like, what time is my doctor's appointment? Have I paid that invoice? Did I do this? Like, who do I need to text back today? So all of that stuff gets pushed out in order to make room for Nevermoor. I don't know how to do it any other way, unfortunately.
You've planned 9 books in the Nevermoor series. It's quite unusual for an author to plan that far ahead.
Yeah, I've stitched myself up quite nicely. It is. So I took 10 years to write Nevermoor, and I talk about this a lot. People always say in publishing, you've got a lifetime to write your first book and then 6 months to write the second. And I did really take my time. And at the time, because I was in my, that was for the bulk of my 20s that I was writing the first book. And at the time, that was a source of frustration to me because I just started going, okay, I'm going to write a book. This is what it's about. And I'm going to have it done in 6 months. And of course that didn't happen because that's not how my head works. But that was honestly the best thing that possibly could have happened, because what it meant is that it really had a lot of time to incubate. And so the idea, which could, if I had finished it in 6 months, I'm sure it would have been fine, but it would have been a very different book. It would have been kind of shallower in the sense that, like, when you enter Nevermoor, I want you to feel that this is a world with legs. This world, it's a world with roots that go deep, and it also sprawls outwards, and you're just seeing this particular part of it. And because I spent 10 years working on it, I had never finished a story before. Like I'd never finished it. This was the first book I ever wrote. The most I'd ever completed was like a very short story. Everything else I'd sort of written things, dropped them, written things, dumped them, like, you know, it was just a graveyard of stories, basically. But this one, there was just something about it. I was determined that this would be the book that I finish. And because, again, like in hindsight, now that I am diagnosed with ADHD, I know exactly what was going on. I'm so easily bored in a way. Like I want to go to the next thing. I want to go to the next story. I can't stop ideas coming. I can't, that's a tap that I cannot switch off. People often will ask, where do your ideas come from? And my question is, how do you stop them? Like, I can't turn that tap off. And so every new flashy, shiny, exciting idea that I had, which could have probably been a story or a book in its own right, I would just put into Nevermoor. And so it became this, like, I call it my kitchen sink novel, because everything that I loved that was interesting or funny or cute or silly to me, it all just went into Nevermoor. Basically, like, this is the story that is so specific to me and my taste and my brain that I will finish it. Like, I will finish this series because I love it so much. Like, I have to be the #1 fan of Nevermoor, which sounds like such an egotistical thing to say, but like, if I'm not, I will, my brain just won't let me continue. It will just stop at book 7 and be like, nah, sorry, I'm done. But because I just keep filling it and broadening it and deepening it, because I love it, and I just want to know how it finishes myself as well.
Jessica, it's been a great pleasure to talk to you, and thank you so much for joining me on the Good Reading Podcast.
Oh, likewise, it's been lovely. Thank you so much for having me.
I've been talking to Jessica Townsend about the 4th book in her Nevermoor series, Silverborn, The Mystery of Morrigan Crow. It's published by Lothian, and you can find it at goodreadingmagazine.com.au. My name's Greg Dobbs, and thanks for listening. Subscribe to Good Reading print and online magazine at goodreadingmagazine.com.au.